Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be removing and replacing the glow plugs on this Ford Transit fitted with the TDDI 2.4 liter engine. So first we're going to pull some codes and scan the vehicle. I've just plugged it in here and we're going to be checking if there's any codes just to see if there's any problems or if any fault is noted with the glow plugs or anything similar. So now with the test complete you can see that there's no problems whatsoever. So what you want to do is before starting work, so now what we want to do is we want to disconnect the battery. So we'll disconnect the negative terminal, and now what we'll do is we'll put the hazards or the lights on just to make sure that power is definitely killed to the battery, because the problem is sometimes these transits are fitted with the secondary leisure battery, and as a result it can still pull power from the secondary battery. So if that's the case, then you'll have to disconnect the positive side as well. So that positive over there, see how I disconnected it? Make sure you disconnect that as well, otherwise the ECU can still be powered. So now we're moving on to the tools. You need a set of nose pliers, ratchets, 3/8 inch, half inch and the small 1/4 inch. You'll need a similar small box like this. You need extensions, T20 to remove the plastic shroud. You'll need a T40 to remove the engine cover, 8mm, 10mm and a 10mm deep socket to remove the intake manifold bolts, and a 14mm to remove the wiper bolt, and a container just to keep everything organized. So now moving on to the engine. Here you can see this is the wire for the glow plugs. It's burnt and it's broken. This is normally the case because one of the glow plugs is short, or it's basically drew too much current and it's caused that wire to overheat and break. So now in order to get to the glow plugs, we have to take off the intake manifold off. To get to the intake manifold, you have to take off the top cowling or the rain gutter, some people might refer to it. Once you take that off, it's all held in by 10mm bolts. And also your top cover here. So that cover there, that has to be removed. This is the one that's held in by the T20 Torx. So take those caps off and take your wipers off with that 14mm socket that I showed you earlier. There and there as well. And underneath there's hidden Torx bolts there as well, so don't forget those. Once you take the wipers off, then they'll be obvious. This is a quick diagram if you would like to refer to it. So now this is the plastic cover that I was referring to, and that's the part that's held in by those Torx bolts. There's there, another one there, another one there, 4 more there, and one at the bottom there and one at the bottom the other side. So don't forget to take the rubber off, and then you'll find those 2 hidden bolts. So this is just the cowling when I removed it. It's just held in by those 10mm bolts that I referred to earlier. Also don't forget the one wiper bolt that sits in the drain itself, as seen in this diagram here. The first bolt and number 9, don't forget that. So what I want to do is start off by removing the intake pipe on the EGR valve, and remove all the electrical connectors running to it. So this is the Ford diagram if you need to refer to it. So with the intake manifold, the bolts right at the back are a bit difficult to get to. So you need that ratchet and socket set, or you need a swivel joint socket set system. Others it's a bit difficult to remove it. So this is just a quick diagram if you need to refer to where the bolts are and how many there are. So now we'll begin by opening up the bolts. Take your time and open it in increments. If any of the wiring loom or any of the vacuum hoses are coming your way, you can disconnect it and move that to one side. Ford recommend replacing the gaskets. You can choose whether you want to do this or not. Just inspect the gaskets and see if they're in good condition or not. So now I'll show you what my setup was with the socket set. As I mentioned before, all the bolts are held on, so as soon as you remove them, they're secure in place. They're not going to fall anywhere, so you don't need to worry about the bolts coming out. Just make sure you undo it fully. This the intake manifold will get stuck. So this was my setup. So with the 10mm short extension, it's a 3-inch extension and the universal joint. Take it in there and you get this slotted like right in there, right at the back, and that's where that one bolt sits, and it's extremely difficult to get to. The other ones are not so bad, so it's just that one. That's the main hassle. Once you're past that, then you can start undoing the remaining bolts. They're not too difficult. So when you take off your intake manifold, make sure all the gaskets are in place, and you can choose whether you want to replace them if they're in bad condition or you want to use the existing ones. So these bolts will not fall out, they're captive in there. So that's what I was referring to before. So that's quite a good design. So you can't really lose them. So don't worry about losing any of the bolts when you open it fully. Keep the intake manifold to one side, and now we'll get to the glow plugs. So there's the connectors at the top there. So those are the 4 nuts. So what we might need to do is soak these overnight. I normally recommend soaking them overnight, at least at a minimum. Otherwise you can follow this guide, which is by far the best. You want to spray it down a few weeks prior and let that oil soak in there, as seen in this diagram here. So now we'll go ahead and tape up all the intake ports so nothing falls inside, because that's the last thing you need, if something falling inside and going to the engine. Generally, as a rule of thumb, the glow plugs are supposed to be done every 80 to 100,000 kilometers or every 5 years. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have history, go ahead and replace it. Now we'll spray some penetrating fluid in there, something like WD-40 or CRC, and let it soak in there. So now this is the maximum shear torque that you want to use when opening the plugs. It's very important. And this is just a Ford diagram that you can refer to if needed. All the torque settings, that will be later on in the video as well when we close everything up. And this is the torque settings for various glow plug sizes. So now with the 7mm socket, we'll go ahead and remove the electrical connector, so the nuts that hold on the positive for each glow plug. As you can see here, and you will see later on in the video, these glow plugs were probably changed more than 10 years ago, and as a result they've rusted in, because these Ford Transits do have an inherent problem where the water does leak from the rain channel or from that top channel that we took out earlier. It falls onto the injectors and then that drips onto the glow plugs, thereby rusting it in place. So it's inevitable, if the glow plugs are this old, they will break, so just keep that in mind and prepare for a worst case scenario. So as you can see, the rear ones usually don't play up because they're covered quite well. They're tucked away from rain and water ingress at the top. and that's the intake glow plug from cylinder number 4. And this is what's happened to the other ones. You can see they're all rusted in there, and the electrodes are just basically pulled out and it's separated. So number 1 would most likely be the reason why that wire got burnt. It's because it's short and it's basically disintegrated from there, and it caused high resistance, thereby melting that wire. So now we're using a torch and just heating up the cylinder head. This will assist the penetrating oil getting down there, and it's our best chance of extracting what's remaining of the glow plugs, because a couple of them have sheared in there. So this is cylinder number 3. So the bottom half of the glow plug is still intact, so we can use that and open it slowly. You can see that I've switched to a 1/2 inch ratchet now, and I'm slowly doing it in increments. So that's what's happened now. So later on in the video I'll explain how the extractor set works and how we've used it to remove the plugs that are broken in place. So now, using this glow plug extractor set, we're going to remove the damaged glow plugs, the ones that have sheared off in there. And these are the new plugs. These are the basically OEM or OE Bosch plugs. So you saw me remove the third one. That came off okay. So we'll have to tap out the first 2 and remove them from the head. So now I've got the pilot tool installed here from that removal set. So that just sits over the broken glow plugs so that you get it perfect in the center. And that's the drill bit which we'll be using to clean up the interior of the glow plug. And then we'll be cutting threads into there. So we'll be tapping threads into there, and then we'll be attempting to extract it out. So when drilling into the glow plug, just make sure you keep extracting the swath. So do it in steps and increments so that you can vacuum out all the metal shavings and the swath so nothing goes internally. It doesn't stay within the glow plug, it comes out. So now with the pilot tool removed, you'll see that that's where the swath sits. And you can just extract it using a magnet and a vacuum cleaner. Just clean up the debris. Just ensure that your intake ports are taped up well and that nothing can go inside the engine. Follow the instructions on the tool, and you'd want to do this a couple of times just to create a nice surface for the threads we're going to be tapping in there. Now we're going ahead and tapping the threads. So we're cutting threads into that glow plug body because the existing top part where you put your socket in is basically snapped off. So we have to cut these threads in, and we'll use the extractor to try and pull it out, which you'll see a bit later in the video. One important point about these glow plugs, that's a crucial step that you should not avoid, is if, as seen in the video previously, this electrode part here came out with the top connector. If that comes out, so this center middle electrode, if that comes out in one piece, that's normally a good sign, which means that you can extract this glow plug without taking off the head. If that center electrode doesn't come out in one piece, what happens is sometimes it can get stuck in here, the part that actually goes down to the cylinder head. And if for any reason that's jammed in there and you try and break that apart, there's a possibility that this tip could actually fall into the combustion chamber. So that's another point that's worth mentioning. So just bear that in mind. Because if we look at the whole complete glow plug over here, if you're fortunate enough to have it just snap over here, like these ones did, due to the water and the rusting. So if that happens, so this part is broken off here, this part will come out. So this is the broken part. That'll just basically pull out. And as a result, this electrode will also come out. But like I said, if for some reason the electrode doesn't come out and gets jammed in here, then that's when you use the stepped drill bit. So that stepped drill bit goes in here and it will basically drill that and clean up this whole area here. And that's when we use that tap to go in there, as explained previously, to tap threads in and then use the puller to pull it up. But like I said, if for some reason this is broken here, or you suspect this is broken, the cylinder head will have to come out, and then that's when you use this extractor kit here to basically go in there and remove all of this. So with the cylinder head off, you can go ahead and just drill this whole thing using either the appropriate size drill bit. So this one over here would apply to this one, and that would drill it without damaging the threads in most cases, and you can just extract it that way. So it just drills the whole thing out. So it's a tapered drill bit in order to start the hole and keep it straight when drilling down. Another way you could do it is you could use compressed air. So with the compressed air line similar to this, you would take off the injector at the top of the engine, and then you would actually pump air into the cylinder head. So just in case, if for some reason you suspect that there might be a little bit hole, might be a small hole here or something similar, so the swath when you're drilling here might be entering the combustion chamber. By having pressure in the combustion chamber, it pushes all the swath back and out of the combustion chamber, just in case if you suspect that there might be a crack here or something similar. So just bear that in mind. But like I said, the best method still is to soak these glow plugs, soak them at least a week prior with some lubricant, something like the CRC or WD-40. Just spray it in there, keep spraying it on a daily basis, and make sure you drive the vehicle. That way you'll heat cycle all of these threads over here, and it should technically penetrate right through and free up this whole area, and also stop this part here from snapping off. So that's a very important point. Don't skip that. So just make sure if you haven't started the job yet, you can go down that road. But if you encounter a job like this where the glow plugs have just not been changed for so many years, you have no other choice but to try this method out. And if this fails, then you have to pull out the cylinder head. Do it in increments and keep cleaning up that area. Keep vacuuming it so that there's no chance of anything falling near the engine or around it. Because as long as the glow plug is still intact internally, nothing should go inside the engine, because it's sealed from the combustion chamber. You'll see when I pull out the glow plug what I'm referring to. So now we're tapping it with an M6 thread. The kit came with the M5 thread, but it's way too small. So we're using the M6 tap to cut some threads in there. And now we'll have to make an adapter, because the kit didn't come with an extractor for the M6 glow plug tap, because the M5 is way too small. So we'll have to create an adapter system to work with this universal glow plug extractor or puller. So now we're just using a couple of bolts, and we're going to brace them together so that it fits into that pilot tool and the puller. Keep watching the video and you'll see it towards the end, where I explain how everything works. This glow plug removal extractor set, as it only comes with tiny M5 extractors. So now moving outside, this is the torch we're going to be using, and he's going to be brazing it. So the M8 bolt is going to be brazed to the M6 bolt. So the M6 will be going onto the glow plug, where we could just cut the threads, and the M8 is going to go into the extractor tool. So now with all that completed, we're just going to clean it up, take it to the vehicle and mount it to the tool and attempt to pull it out. So I'll explain to you what exactly happened when we took off the plugs. So this is a whole complete glow plug. This is the rear one. So this was on cylinder number 4, and this is how an intact glow plug looks like. So if you notice, this is the threads here that threads into the cylinder head, and this is the point here where you put your socket and you undo the actual glow plug. So what happened was, as you can see here, these sheared off, because with the transits, if you watch one of my other videos, you'll know what I'm talking about, but it leaks water from the top cowling and it falls onto the injectors, and it also overflows on to the top of these glow plugs, so where they are mounted in the cylinder head at the side. So if you don't drive it on a regular basis, what happens is water collects here and it causes this part here to rust, and then that's what happens. So then it just snaps off. So you would have seen earlier in the video, this part here, the electrical side, just pulled out completely. This nut was rusted on and it just broke off and it just came off. So what we did was we actually tapped threads into this broken part here. So using this kit that you would have seen earlier, they give you a tap and die set. So what you do is you tap threads into here where it's broken off using the left hand drill bit. So this is a left hand drill bit, so it allows the swath to come out and it doesn't go internally into the engine. Then you use the tap and die set, and then you basically cut threads into this, and then that's when you need this extractor over here. So in the video you would have heard us say that these transits, it didn't work because we needed a larger M6 adapter to pull it out. So if you look here, this one just goes in there, and this was the largest one. The next one down is the smaller one. Because it's a universal kit, the transits use a different type of glow plug, so they won't have everything. So you'd either have to get an adapter to an M6 thread over here, or you could make one as seen earlier, as we did. So to give you an idea, this is that whole body we were talking about, and this is where it's snapped off. So if you look at it here, some bits are missing, but essentially it's something like that, you could say. So once you tap the threads into the existing glow plug, what you can then do is take this part. So this tool here, the pilot tool I was talking about, this is the extractor part. So the pilot tool, you just slot that in there, and then at the bottom here, you take this thread here and you thread it in there. So you thread that in there first, you get the idea. Do that up there tight. Then when you put this in there, you will basically hold this part here, and then you will just turn this part like so. So if you cut the threads well enough and deep enough into the broken glow plug over there, it'll basically go into there, and while you're winding this out, holding this here, in theory it should extract this glow plug from there. So that's the theory behind it. If you don't know how to use this kit, or you can just follow the instruction manual that normally comes with the kits. This is the tap and die set and the list that we were referring to. So like I said earlier in the video, make sure that you soak. If you notice that your glow plugs are rusted, so the best example is if you look at this one here, if you notice that it's got a bit of corrosion here, and you can see a bit of corrosion here, soak it a week prior and keep drying the vehicle on and off every day. So it heat cycles, and hopefully the lubricant or the penetrating oil that you use will get into the threads here, and it'll just free it up. And always follow that breakaway torque chart that I showed earlier in the video. Always follow that. If anyone needs the part number, this is the part number of the glow plug. And as a rule of thumb, change these glow plugs every 80 to 100,000 kilometers, or every 5 years, whichever comes first. Normally, if you park your vehicle and if you don't use it too often, just check it every other year. Check for rust, and just basically keep an eye on it. As long as you keep an eye on it and possibly keep water out of this area, it'll last you a long time, these glow plugs, and they usually don't play up. But they are a wear item, so keep that in mind. So they will wear out eventually. So we successfully pulled out all the glow plugs. So number 1 and number 2, both of them came out perfectly. We actually left it to soak overnight and returned the next day, and used this extractor, and that's probably your best bet when you don't have any history on the glow plugs or know when it's changed. So that's when it's pulled out. So once they're all pulled out, I recommend cleaning up that whole seat with the reamer, something similar to this. It just goes in there and removes any carbon deposits or similar. It's quite an important step, especially if you don't have history on it. And you can go ahead and torque it down to 30 Newton meters. So as you can see, they don't need much torque at all. And then the nuts on the top, replace them and put in and tighten that to 3 Newton meters. Make sure you use all new nuts. So as you can see, all the glow plugs are now reinstalled. And we've put all new nuts in it as well. And we cleaned up the whole electrical connector. As you saw it previously, it had burnt the wire, so we're going to go next. So now what I'm doing here is just doing a resistance check, and I'm just testing for any high resistance between the main hotspot where it comes off the top, the red positive over there, and it goes to the top of the engine where the top nut is. That feeds each individual glow plug. I'm just checking each one and making sure that there's no high resistance or anything similar. And we're actually going to just test and make sure each one of those glow plugs gets proper voltage to each one. You'll see later on in the video it shows 10 volts. This is because the battery is a bit low, but the general principle is the same if you're going to test your glow plugs, which I do recommend before putting everything back together. So you'll need a helper with this one. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting using a multimeter, put it to volts, 20 volts, and we're going to be checking there's voltage present at the hot side of the glow plug. So what your helper is going to do is they're going to turn on the ignition, thereby turning on the glow plug timer circuit. One word of caution is make sure you plug in your EGR, the valve, plug in the 2 sensors. Otherwise what you're going to find is it's going to throw up fault codes, and if it throws up a fault code, the glow plug light will just keep flashing. And if it's flashing, in most cases it won't activate the glow plugs. So just keep that in mind. You just want to plug that in there. So what you want to do is you want to take your negative on your voltmeter or multimeter and just go anywhere that has a good ground on the head or on the block, anywhere, it doesn't matter. That has a good ground. I don't know if you can see this, but I've put a M clamp here. So at this point you tell your helper to turn on the ignition, and as soon as he turns on the ignition, watch the current draw on the M clamp. That indicates that the glow plugs are working fine. So as mentioned previously, that wire had burnt out, but I've rejoined it now, so that's not a problem anymore. So that's been fixed, and we can see that this circuit is working perfectly now. Once you're all done, go ahead and button everything back up. Everything is reverse of removal. You will see the torque settings come up again. Just torque down the intake manifold, torque down the EGR valve, and put everything back together. Just make sure you double check your intake manifold gaskets and the EGR gasket if they look worn or they're not in good condition. And if they're a bit stiff and they're not soft, then I definitely recommend replacing them. You don't want to have to remove the intake manifold if the gaskets are bad, so just keep that in mind. The ignition on, you'll hear a buzzing noise. That's the lift pump. So most models with the 125 PS motor and above have got a lift pump. The early models and the lower powered models have a manual push tab pump. That's just a lift pump to pull up diesel from the tank to the filter. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this was of some help to you. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned.